Hi, friends. Welcome to another edition of First Chapter Friday. I hope you liked the last book I read, which was Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky. This Friday, we'll be reading Charlie Hernandez and the League of Shadows by Ryan Calejo. It is the first book in a series of 3, and in this fantasy is inspired by folklore, legends, and myths. Charlie, with the help of his lifelong crush, Violet Ray, finds himself in the middle of an ancient battle between the legendary figures from his abuela's stories. Okay, so we're going to get started. And we're going to read the first 4 chapters because the first 3 are really short. And the author says, to my parents who always believed, to my abuelita who helped me believe. Okay, chapter 1. Myths, my abuela used to say, are truths long forgotten by the world, which is probably why she collected them the way some people collect stamps, or mugs with pictures of kittens on them. She gathered tales of enormous horned, snake-like sea creatures, of 2-headed vampire dogs with glowing red eyes, of terrifying man-eating ghouls that stalked the night, searching for naughty children to kidnap. The myths came from all over the Spanish-speaking world, from Madrid to Quito, Mexico City to Buenos Aires. Most of them were hundreds of years old, almost as old as the cultures that had inspired them. Some had spread quickly around the globe, spread like wildfire. Others never even left the tiny rural towns where they'd first been told. All her life, my grandma had been obsessed with Hispanic mythology, with all the legends and stories and folklore, and had spent years teaching them to me. When I was little, we used to hang out in the kitchen on lazy Saturday afternoons. Me in my Power Rangers PJs and chancletas, my abuela telling her favorite tales from memory, making the epic battles and ghoulish monsters come to life with every gesture of her brown and wrinkled hands. Afterwards, she would quiz me on what I'd heard. We played this little game, sort of like Pictionary, where she'd draw a quick sketch of one of the characters, and I would have to guess who, or in most cases, what it was. If I got 4 in a row, she'd let me eat leche condensada right out of the can, which might have been the only thing I enjoyed more than listening to her stories. At the time, I thought it was all just for fun, a cool little game between the two of us. But I should have known better. My abuela hated party games. Chapter 2. I still remember the first night in the police station like it was yesterday. The tall sheriff's deputy telling me that everything was going to be okay, that there was nothing for me to worry about, that they'd find my parents, promising me that. Then he handed me a chewed-up number 2 pencil, dropped a yellow notepad on the desk in front of me, and told me to write down everything. I remembered. Told me not to leave anything out, not even what I was feeling. I'm not sure which was more embarrassing, the fact that I could barely hold a pencil in my sweaty, trembling hands, or that I didn't have anything to write. See, I wasn't there the morning my parents went missing. I was at the local guitar shop. And I wasn't there later that afternoon when our house burned down. I'd biked over to Zoo Miami for the day. So 45 minutes later, I'd gotten down only 2 words, but they were the truest words I'd ever written. I'm scared. So scared I could barely breathe. So scared I could actually feel the blood pulsing through my hands and feet. But I didn't write any of that down. Instead, I sat frozen in the small interrogation room, with tears running down my cheeks, waiting for the deputy to come back, waiting to wake up from this horrible nightmare. And that was when the pain came. It felt like 2 little bee stings up near my temples, hot and sharp, but lasting only for a moment. I remember running my hands through my hair and feeling something strange. I remember getting up and walking to the tiny half bathroom at the end of the hall for a closer look. I even remember the small squeaky sounds my sneakers made on the scuffed and dirty tiles. But what I remember most was the pair of stubby horns I discovered growing out the sides of my head. They were a dark golden color, like honey mixed with dirt. Chapter 3. That day was the single worst day of my life, but the days that followed were almost as bad. Since I didn't have any living relatives, my abuela died when I was 9, and child services was having a hard time finding a place for me, I spent the next 2 weeks sleeping on a scratchy cot in one of the empty cells at the front of the police station. Every night I planted myself on the folding chair outside the station's 911 call center, listening in on the dispatchers, hoping to hear something, anything, about my parents. And every night I was disappointed. Obviously, with a pair of horns growing out of my head, I couldn't help but think back to my abuela's myths, especially the one about the morphling. In those stories, the young hero would always defeat his nemesis, an evil, narcissistic, twice-cursed witch, by manifesting some kind of animal trait. It was usually something odd, like fins or hooves, or an armadillo shell. And even though it seemed sort of similar to what was happening to me, minus the whole fighting an evil witch part, of course, I honestly didn't see how a fairy tale could have anything to do with my current situation. They were just made-up stories. You know, kid stuff. Then about a week or so later, the horns suddenly vanished. I couldn't explain it. I just woke up one morning, felt around underneath my hoodie, and they were gone. At that point, I just assumed, like most people probably would, that I'd had some sort of nervous breakdown, my terrified mind frantically mixing reality with fiction, trying to bring me back to a time when I felt safe, back to a time when I was surrounded by people who loved me and cared for me and would never let anything bad happen to me. At least that's what I kept telling myself. That is, until the unthinkable happened. Again. Chapter 4. This time it happened in the worst place imaginable. Middle school. Ponce de Leon Middle, to be exact. And just like the first time, I was caught completely off guard. See, by then my life had almost started to feel normal again. More than 4 weeks had passed since the horns. School was starting back up, and my 2 best friends had come home from summer camp. Not only that, but I wasn't sleeping at the police station anymore. The state had found me a temporary guardian who lived in the same South Florida neighborhood, and I'd moved into her dusty upstairs attic. Not perfect, sure, but it definitely beat the heck out of a crummy 6x8 cinder block cell. So anyway, there I was, just sort of dozing off in third period history when my life took another crazy detour into Freaksville. Unlike the horns, this particular manifestation started with an itch. A hot, sort of painful itch way down on my back. Then the itch began to spread, up my sides, along my shoulders, down the backs of my arms. It felt as if an army of creepy bugs were crawling all over me. I started to scratch and scratch, but it didn't help. The itching only got worse, my skin growing hotter and redder and ridiculously flaky. And that's when it happened. That's when a fat gray feather burst through the skin on my forearm like a zombie hand busting out of a grave. For half a second, I wondered if Mr. Henry's snooze-inducing lesson about the French Revolution was somehow making me hallucinate. Which, by the way, wouldn't have been the first time. But then another feather sprang up, this one through a tiny pore in the crook of my left arm, and I felt my blood turn to ice. Dios mío! I screamed on the inside, not again! Jumping to my feet, I raced for the door, snatching the big red hall pass from the pegboard on my way out. Behind me, I heard Mr. Henry shout, "Hey, Charlie, where you going?" But I didn't stop, didn't even look back. Thankfully, the hallway was empty, no 8th graders making out by the stairs, no hall monitors lurking with their bright yellow t-shirts and walkie-talkies. I pounded past the wall of lockers and around the corner through the heavy metal door next to shop class. My breaths coming fast and shallow, then up a short flight of stairs and into the boys' bathroom, which thankfully was also empty. I ducked into the first stall, peeled off my shirt, and gasped. My chest, smooth and hairless as a baby's bottom a minute ago, was now covered in a forest of ugly little feathers. I didn't think, just started plucking. And the first thing I learned, ripping feathers out of your body isn't any fun. It's actually insanely painful. Sort of like tweezing your eyebrows, except those eyebrows were as long as my pinky finger and had hard keratin roots that sank deep down into my pores, deeper than any hair follicle. My skin stung. Tears ran down my cheeks, and I had to bite down on my tongue just to keep from screaming. But I didn't stop. In fact, I started plucking even faster, squeezing my eyes shut against the tiny stings of pain and tossing the feathers into the toilet by the handful. Rip, wince, toss. Rip, wince, toss. I almost started to get into a rhythm, too, when I opened my eyes again and saw something that made my heart stop. The toilet bowl was full of feathers, almost to the rim of the seat, but my body was still covered with them, which could mean only one thing. They were regrowing faster than I could pluck them. No! I screamed. No, 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 no! My mind was reeling. I didn't know what to do. I tried flushing the toilet, but nothing happened. I tried again, jiggling the handle this time. But instead of the feathers disappearing down the hole like they were supposed to, water filled the bowl and an unhealthy gurgling sound rose from the bottom. I froze for an instant. Froze with horror, watching as the water rose up, up, up and began to spill over the sides of the bowl and onto the floor. The gurgling sounds turned into choking ones. The sharp stench of number one and its even stinkier numerical compadre stung my nostrils. Do something! In a panic, I peeked into the toilet, trying to see if there was anything I could do to help get the freaking thing to flush. Huge mistake, because just at that moment, a fountain of whiz-scented nasty sprayed straight up from the center of the bowl, blasting me in the face and knocking me off balance. I crashed through the stall door and landed on the floor with a wet splash. My breath exploded from my lungs in a painful whoosh. The world teetered. My head spun. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, the choking, gurgling sound spread to the other toilets, and suddenly all 5 fudge funnels were overflowing, the urinals too. For a crazy second, I thought about trying to clean this mess up, maybe spreading some paper towels over the floor to soak up the water. But then I realized there weren't enough paper towels in the dispenser. There probably weren't even enough in the entire school. Scrambling to my feet, I ran to the bathroom door, cracked it open enough for one eye, and peered out. The hall was still empty, which was awesome, but how much longer would it stay that way? There couldn't have been more than 15 minutes left of class when I'd Speedy Gonzalez it out of there, and I had no idea how much time had passed. Doesn't matter, I told myself. Either way, I had to get out of there. Either way, I had to find something to cover up the feathers. Unfortunately, I could think of only one place to look. And we're going to stop right there. I wonder where he goes. So, if you like the beginning of this book, come on in and check it out. We have book 2, which is Charlie Hernandez and the Castle of Bones, and book 3 will come out in September. We are going to be taking a break from First Chapter Fridays because the summer reading program is coming up and starts this June. But we'll resume our First Chapter Fridays in September. So I hope to see you during the summer reading program, and we'll see you for the next First Chapter Friday in September. Bye.